Onde tem cultura, a Vale está. No poder criativo que nasce dos palcos, orquestras, das artes, das ruas e dos museus. Na valorização das diversas identidades brasileiras e na preservação de memórias. É valorizando a cultura que crescemos e evoluímos juntos. Instituto Cultural Vale.
Ministério da Cultura e a Associação Casa Azul apresentam 22ª Flip, Festa Literária Internacional de Paraty. A Flip conta com benefício da Lei Federal de Incentivo à Cultura, PRONAC 235060, e possui acessibilidade para pessoas com deficiências física, visual e auditiva. Tem patrocínio Master, Instituto Cultural Vale. Patrocínio Ouro, Itaú, CCR e Suzano. Patrocínio Prata, Mac Móveis, Eletronuclear, O Globo e Sesc. Patrocínio Bronze, Sebrae e Globo Livros. Parceria institucional, Prefeitura de Paraty, Secretaria Estadual de Turismo do Rio de Janeiro e Museu do Território. É uma concepção Associação Casa Azul. Realização, Ministério da Cultura, Governo Federal, Brasil, União e Reconstrução. Obrigada e boa mesa. Flip, o encontro da literatura com a cidade.
Eu trabalho aqui já tem um bom tempo, uns 35 anos. Trabalho como você vê, artesanato, eu que pinto meus barquinhos, eu que faço. Olha, eu acho que quando eu começo aqui pintando meu barquinho, eu relaxo. É uma coisa gostosa que você faz, você esquece de tudo. E eu me tipo aqui, fico pintando aqui, parece que me traz uma paz, uma tranquilidade muito boa. Como eu tenho 2 filhas, moram fora, faz faculdade e a necessidade mesmo, né? Aí eu comecei a pegar, que são uma parceria que eu tenho com o pessoal do Mamanguá, eles fazem o barquinho, eu comecei a pintar e foi dando certo. Hoje eu levo, assim, não é só como necessidade, eu amo o que eu faço, eu amo estar aqui trabalhando, eu amo fazer isso aqui e Paraty é tudo, é maravilhoso.
Flip, o encontro da literatura com a cidade.
There is no more there.
Boa noite, Paraty.
Good evening, Paraty.
A gente vai começar essa mesa que
We're
chama
going to
Não
start
Existe Mais
this
Lá.
panel
E é uma
named
mesa
There Is No More
talvez das
There.
mais
It
urgentes
is
hoje,
maybe
porque
one of the
fala
most
de duas
urgent
cidades que
panels
foram
today because
destruídas,
it
uma delas
addresses
continua
two
sendo
cities that were destroyed,
incessantemente.
one of
E
which
para
continues to be
apresentar essa mesa, eu resolvi
incessantly
ler poema
destroyed.
que, para
And
sorte de
to
vocês, não
open
é
this
meu.
panel, I decided to read a
É
poem which
poema
was
de
not written
poeta
by me.
palestino
It's
chamado
from a
Marwan
Palestinian
Makul.
poet, Marwan Makul.
E a tradução
And the
é do meu amigo
translation
Mamed
is
Jarouche, que
by
fez essa
my friend Mamed
delicadeza, então a
Jarouche,
ele eu agradeço.
and I thank him for this.
Para escrever um poema
In
que não seja
order for me to
político,
write poetry that
devo
isn't
escutar os
political,
pássaros.
I must
Mas para
listen to the
escutar os
birds.
pássaros, é preciso
But
que
to
pare o bombardeio.
hear the birds, the warplanes must be silent.
Para fazer essa mediação, eu vou chamar a Bianca
To
Tavolari,
mediate
que é
this
professora
panel,
de
I
Direito na
invite Bianca
FGV,
Tavolari, a
e ela é
professor
editora
of
de uma
law at
sessão na
FGV,
revista
and she's the
451
editor of
chamada
a
A
session
Cidade e as
at
Coisas. Bianca.
451 magazine named The City and the Things, a cidade e as coisas. Bianca.
Muito boa noite a todas as
Good evening,
pessoas
everyone.
presentes nessa sala. Meu nome é Bianca Tavolari.
My name
E
is
essa
Bianca
mesa se
Tavolari,
chama
and this
Não
panel
Existe
is
Mais
named
Lá.
There Is No
E eu
More
gostaria de
There.
chamar o
And I
Atef
would
Abu
like
Saif
to
e a Julia Dantas
invite
para virem
Atef
aqui ao
Abu
palco para a
Saif
gente
and
começar.
Julia Dantas to the stage.
Atef Abu Saif é
Atef
escritor
Abu
palestino,
Saif is a
nascido em
Palestinian
campo de
writer.
refugiados na
He was
faixa de Gaza
born
em
in a refugee
1973.
camp in
É
Gaza
autor de
Strip
ensaios
in
políticos,
1973.
9
He's the
romances.
author
Ele
of
me
political
corrigiu,
essays,
porque tá
9
escrito 5
novels. He
romances em
corrected
todos
me
os
because
lugares, ele
I
corrigiu, são
read
9.
everywhere
E
5, but
2
he
livros
corrected
de
me.
contos.
It's 9, and
Seu
2 short
primeiro
story
livro,
books. And his
traduzido ao
first book
português,
translated into Portuguese,
Quero Estar Acordado Quando Morrer,
Don't Look
foi
Left,
publicado esse ano pela editora Elefante,
A Diary of
traduzido
Genocide,
por
Quero Estar
Gisele
Acordado Quando
Eberstecher,
Morrer, was
e é um diário dos
published
85
this year,
dias
and
em
it's
que
a
permaneceu
journal
em
of the
Gaza,
85 days he spent
contados a
in
partir
Gaza,
do dia 7
counted
de
from
outubro de
October
2023,
7,
marco dos
2023,
ataques do Hamas
a
a
landmark
Israel
of the
e da
attacks
escalada
of
autoritária
Hamas
de
to Israel and
bombardeios
the
e
authoritarian
destruição ao povo palestino.
escalating
Seu livro é um registro
bombardment of the
dia a
Palestinian
dia
people,
do
and his
genocídio em
book
Gaza,
is a
porque é
recording
de
of every day
genocídio que
living
se
in
trata.
Gaza
Até
and of
Abu
the
Saif já
genocide
havia
taking place
escrito
in
e
Gaza, because
publicado outro
that's what it
livro
is
sob
about,
a forma de
genocide. Atef
diário,
Abu Saif
intitulado
already published
The
another
Drone
book in the
Eats
form
With
of a
Me,
journal,
a
The
tradução
Drone
literal sendo
Eats With
O
Me,
Drone Come Comigo, publicado em inglês pela
published in
Comma
English
Press
by
e
Comma
pela Beacon
Press and by
e
Beacon
ainda sem
Press,
tradução ao português.
and not
Nesse
translated
livro
into
inicial,
Portuguese
ele
yet. In this
registra a
initial
ofensiva
book, he
israelense à
records
faixa de
the
Gaza, que teve início em 7 de
Israeli
julho de
offensive to the Gaza
2014
Strip
e que
that
durou
started in
51
July
dias,
7,
matando
2014,
milhares
lasting
de
for
cidadãos palestinos,
21 days and
deixando
killing
legado de
thousands of
destruição de
Palestinians
mais de
and leaving a
17 mil
legacy of
casos.
destruction of
O título faz
more than
referência ao drone que Atef era
17,000
capaz de ver da
homes.
sua
And
janela,
the
que
title
também, por sua
refers
vez,
to
seria
drones
capaz
that
de
he could see
verificar
through
o
his
próprio
window,
drone
and at the
com
same
precisão
time the drones
quantos
would
bolinhos de
also
falafel estavam em seu prato.
capable of determining how
Julia
many
Dantas
falafels
é
were
escritora,
in his
tradutora,
dish
professora
on
de
the
escrita
table.
criativa, nascida em
Julia
Porto Alegre, no Rio Grande
Dantas
do
is a
Sul, em
writer and creative writing
1985.
teacher. She
Seu
was
livro,
born in
Ruína e
Porto Alegre in
Leveza, foi publicado
1985.
pela
Her
Dublinense em
book,
2015, foi
Ruína e
finalista do Prêmio
Leveza,
São
was
Paulo de
published
Literatura.
in 2015,
Em
and she was a
2022,
finalist of the São
publicou
Paulo
Ela Se Chama
Literature
Rodolfo,
Award in 2022.
vencedor nas
She published
categorias
Ela Se
romance
Chama
do
Rodolfo. Her
Prêmio
name is
Livro do
Rodolfo,
Ano, da
winner of
Associação Gaúcha de
Book of the
Escritores
Year
e do Prêmio
from
Academia
the
Rio Grandense de
Gaúcho
Letras.
Writers
Nesse
Association
ano, Júlia
and
acaba de
others. And
publicar
this
seu
year,
mais novo
Julia
livro,
has just
A
published
Mulher de Dois
her new
Esqueletos, que
book, The
também
Woman
foi
of Two
publicado pela
Skeletons, A Mulher de
Dublinense.
Dois Esqueletos,
A
also
Júlia
published
também
by
organizou
Dublinense.
o blog O
Julia
Diário da
also
Pandemia,
organized a
sob a
blog,
forma de
a
registros,
journal of the
dia de cada
pandemic,
vez,
recording
reuniu
one
relatos
day
de
at
mais
a
de
time
200
with
pessoas
testimonies
sobre as suas
from more
experiências de
than 200
confinamento em
people
Porto Alegre.
regarding their
A
experiences
partir
of
de texto
confinement in the
seu,
city of
A
Porto
Casa
Alegre.
Alagada,
And also, she recorded how her house was flooded in the Journal of the Flooding, organized by two journalists, Rafaela Dona Flores and Felipe dos Santos, in which many people gave testimony of the greatest climatic tragedy in Rio Grande do Sul, floodings and forest fires that kill and displace, and they are not new in Brazil, but the floodings in May of 2024 that devastated the city in the capital of Rio Grande do Sul were not only unprecedented in terms of scale, but also they challenge anything we could imagine would be the definition of a risk area. And it's not only about an accident or incident, it's about human beings. And this is not an easy conversation, and probably we will not bring you good news. But beyond loss and suffering that are still present, our talk will discuss the loss of references from the most intimate place of life and home to the urban space, which is destroyed or underwater.
Eu tenho desafio enorme aqui.
And I do have a huge challenge here, because the first is to establish a parallel between two very different experiences, but they could still be thought of at the same time. And this conversation today will be an attempt to bring them closer and try to establish the links between those open wounds. And I have to thank Julia and Abu Saif for being here, because what they are doing is writing to the world in a very open way. And my first question for both of you is based on the idea of a journal or a diary. You both write fiction, but this journaling shape or format imposed itself. In the case of Atef, there was the book that we mentioned, and bringing testimony of the situation and of his experience, of his view. And in the case of Julia, gathering many testimonies, the testimonies of many different people in one place. So Julia, could you start? Good evening, Bianca and Atef. It's an honor to be here with you. Of course, this is not the most joyful moment of Flip, but it's a great pleasure to be here with you, and also all of those who were in the room and outside. And the dialogue imposed itself into urgent moments, first of all during the pandemic, and then the floodings this year. Mainly, I think because there was, at those points, there was no literature time, the time of writing and letting it rest for some time and elaborating it, but those were situations in which there was no time available. We needed to record what was happening. In the beginning of the pandemic, we hoped that it would last not so long. And at the moment of the floodings, we were hoping that not everything was lost, and we were very disoriented, but like everyone else. So there was a feeling of urgency and a feeling that we needed to urgently do. I needed to urgently do what I do, which is writing, and many people were moved at the moment and mobilized, and people that had boats, they took their boats to the streets to rescue people, rescue animals, or take food to people who were isolated, and the only thing I could do was to record everything in writing, organize those recordings, those testimonies. Even though I was one of the victims of the floodings, I wanted to contribute to the feeling that, yes, we are facing the biggest tragedy until now, climatic tragedy, but we want to find a way to rebuild our city, a city that we thought we were losing, and I wanted to be part of this collective movement of trying to do something together, understanding such an unimaginable situation. It is still something difficult to understand, even for me, who was one of the people there at the moment. It is very difficult to conceive the reality of the event, but that moment was a moment of creating connections and links, Atef.
Thank you very much, Felipe, and the team of my publisher, Elephant, and Bianca and Julia, for the nice discussion we had. But I would say the usual there was, I never meant to write a diary, actually, But what writers does in the war? He writes. This is my mission as a writer. When I was in Gaza and I saw everything around me collapsing and the city is vanishing gradually. The city was every day like, and my friends, my family are dying every day. So my mission, I wouldn't say a big word, but my work is to write. Mm-hmm. So at the beginning, when I started writing these diaries, I don't know what I was writing. I was swimming in the beach, then the war broke out, then everything was burning around me, then I was running, this is as the first essay. And just in the mind of the author, I was saying to myself, wow, this is very paradoxical, Mm-hmm. A man trying, actually I remember that I didn't swim in the beach in the last 4 years. So I told my brother, let's, do it. And I didn't know that's going to be the last time I go there. Then I was writing just the details what happened. And then I continued doing this actually, in Arabic and English. Mm-hmm. Then after a week, I realized when I was seeing everything is vanishing, destroyed. And of course, to hear is not like to live it. When we write, we betray reality as authors, because we're never honest and convey and transmitting all the feelings and the truth. Even I lived it, and it's in my body, I know it. Mm-hmm. But even still, I didn't tell I tried my best. But so after a week, I thought I might die, actually. I saw it because I was feeling death around me, Just you could feel its touch on your shoulder, and you could smell it, because you walk, then the person beside you dies. Then death was close to you. Then I said, in case I died, and actually I had this feeling, and this is not metaphoric, We authors like to play with metaphors, but this is not metaphor, this is the truth. Then I said, I'm going to write, so in case I died, people will read what happened to me. Mm-hmm. So here, the idea of the journal or the diary started to be more systematic. Like, I want to write every day, every little details that happens to me. And so I'm not a journalist, I'm not political analyst, though I am actually. I'm professor of political science, and I write a weekly political article in the largest Arab and Palestinian newspaper. But I was not doing this as a political scientist or a journalist or a historian, whatever, Just I was doing it because I thought this life, which world tries to take from me, and has been taken from many of my family members and friends, worth to be told to the others. So I was saying, in case I die, just, I'm not going to be forgotten. Because, what war makes us? Numbers. Now what you say, all of us. 42,000 Palestinians were killed in this war. Those are not 42,000. Those are 42 lives, memories, dreams, and every one of them has hundreds of dreams, So, and then you say the Gaza city was damaged. This is a city of 9,000 years old. Some of the buildings are 1,000 years old, and so these stories, I didn't want to be a number myself. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to be just, and I remember the first day we were sitting in the press house, It's like a press club in Gaza. Unfortunately, it was damaged now. And, it's funny, because we were 4, and the 3 died, actually, in the war. Mm. I just survived. They were all killed later on. There are 3 journalists. I'm not a journalist, though I worked a bit as a journalist. So the people who make the news are watching the news because they became the news themselves, the journalists. And this is why 147 Palestinian journalists was killed. And this is the highest percentage in world history. This means every 2 days a journalist is killed in this war. This is higher than the Second World War. But we keep silent because those journalists were killed because we should keep silent. We should not be informed. So this is how it came, the idea of writing these diaries. Just it's selfish, you know. Writers are very selfish, no? Yeah, they like to write about them. But I didn't want to be transformed into piece of news, a figure, a number. Then after that, you know, it became responsibility. And here comes the actual role of the author, you know. Because people started, when they realized that I'm doing this diary, as you did in the testimonies, they start to come to me, till this happened to me. And I remember this lady who was teaching her son, 5 years old, how to write the alphabet on the sand in Rafah. She took it from my hand. She said, tell my story. Because she thought she's striving, she's struggling to get her son not being illiterate. And we are the only Arab country which we don't have electricity, by the way. Now, thanks to the war, we have electricity. Palestine used to export teachers in the 1920s. We used to export teachers to 10 Arab countries before the Nakba, and now we have electricity because of the war, because we don't have a school, 500 schools. You know, figures are very, very disturbing. So writing became kind of responsibility, because you want to tell about those people. And those people, they want to be told about. They don't want to be forgotten, like me. So they want their stories to be here. So it's like, you know, I would say through 3 months, you know, different stages, you know, of writing took place. And believe me, I never thought of writing a book. And even when I was writing and it was published all over the world, the largest Arabic newspapers, English-speaking, Spanish-speaking, Italian, you know, German even, Der Spiegel, and, you know. Just I wanted to, because I was not sure until 3 months when I left Gaza because of official meetings I had to do outside Gaza. I was not sure I'm going to make it. And sometimes, you know, you wake up in the morning and you ask yourself this silly question. How can I be sure I'm not dead? What if all the people around me are dead? Who can tell me? You are out of civilization. You don't know that for 1 year, no Gazan ever seen a television in Gaza. Electricity is not there in Gaza from the second day of the war. And people until now, they carry water like I used to do. So when I wake up in the morning, I ask myself, you know, when I felt that I'm alive, when I was reading what I write. And I was doing it after like 3 weeks, actually. After I finished something, I would read it loud for myself. So I hear my voice telling myself what happened to me during the day. Then I ask myself, wow, this means that somebody wrote this about me. This person is me, because I'm thinking about myself. So this means I'm alive. So through writing, I could survive. It was a tool of survival, and it matters. I think you read a poem by Marwan, my friend, that, you know, writing in the Palestinian case is not only writing. Darwish, our great poet, once said, like, in 1967, I think his famous poem, I would say, go in Arabic, then it says, نحن يا أختاه منذ 20 عاما نحن لا نكتب شعرا نحن نقاتل يا جرح المكابر وطني ليس حقيبة وأنا لست مسافر. He says, we're not writing poetry. For 20 years, we're not writing poetry, we're fighting. Because our country is not a travel bag, you know. So there is a mission for the author, I think. And I thought this was my role in the war. This is what I'm good in, actually. And many when I go to Arab countries, I think in Morocco asked me, how come you write this elegant language during the war? People die and destroy. My house was destroyed as well. Everything was around. Then I said, this is what I can. This is what I'm good in as author. this is what I can do. Yeah, so I'm gonna stop here. It's just this.
I would like for you to comment. I would like for you to comment where you were at the time that your lives changed. And I understand that the situation of Atef and Julia were very different in the sense that Julia, it was the first time that she experienced a flood which affected her own home and flooded her own home. Atef tells in his book that he survived the first Intifada, the second Intifada. He survived 2014 and 2023. It's one more episode, dramatic episode in his life series, but in the book, Don't Look Left, Atef begins on October 7th telling us that he was bathing at the beach at the sea. He was in Gaza for a work mission as the Minister of Culture of the Palestinian Authority, a position that he held and had since 2019 when the attacks began. Julia, meanwhile, tells us that together with her companion, she made the decision, even with the storm coming and the warnings coming, to stay in her apartment. And they prepared in a almost a funny way. They purchased snacks and beer to survive the weekend. They created a barrier, built a barrier in their apartment, joking. They could never have imagined that the rain would actually rise that high and flood their apartment. I would like for you both to comment at the time when you faced the unheard of, this idea of that moment. Does that make sense? Atef, would you like to begin?
You mean when I said, ask this question again? Yeah.
The time when you saw what was unheard of, there was a threshold that your life was going to change. Your position is very different, I understand, because you survived a number of attacks like that. So this is one more in a series. But if you could tell us about this October 7th in 2023.
Most of the Palestinians, they're born during war and they die during war, you know. And I was born during war, 1973. And my dad was born during the Nakba, 1950, in a tent. Actually, and he died in a tent from the war as well. So but at certain moment, you're not sure if you can make it or not. Mm-hmm. And honestly, after a week, I was not sure I'm going to make it. And you don't give up. Because, you know, hope is something important in our life. And if we don't think of tomorrow, we don't enjoy today. Because if we have something to figure out and to dream of, then we enjoy what we are doing. But at certain time, you know, I was a father taking care of my son in the war. And, you know, you have to be a father and you have to be a writer and you have to take care of your dad, etc. You know, it was very complicated. And you don't want to give up. And at the same time, when I say writing became responsibility, because I couldn't stop writing even. Because people were expecting you to continue. And so at certain moment, writing became a trick, you know. It's part of your survival. It's part of the essential things that you have to do. And like, I have to find water, I have to find the bread. No bread, of course, you know. I have to make the bread, actually. But, you know, whatever. And you have to find food. And you have to look for the safest place you can find in Gaza. And no place is safe in Gaza. Even the church was attacked. And people, they don't know, in Gaza, we have the third oldest church on earth. It's in Gaza. And they attacked it, and 18 Christian Palestinians were killed in the church. Among them, the Gaza main photographer, Marwan Tarazi, who has all the archive of Gaza City in the last 150 years, photography. Anyway, so no place is safe. So you have to figure out, you know, and sometimes you ask yourself, this question comes again to you, does it worth doing this? Hey, you know, you might die. So what is the importance of writing if I die? And this is, one of the many questions of course, human history, why do we write? And again, when you see things falling apart around you, so you mentioned in your introduction the urban the planning of the place, and and you see the city collapsing, and when I was driving from my place to the press house, it usually takes 13 minutes. Every day, it used to take 3 minutes longer or 4 minutes, because I will pass from the street, I find the new buildings were attacked, then the street is blocked, I have to reverse and find another further alternative option. Of course, you don't have a Google map or whatever to tell you, so you have to figure out yourself. And so when you see all this, then what you can do? Either you give up or you continue. And I chose to continue doing what I'm good in. Of course, I'm a good father. I took care of my son at the end, But I'm good in writing. I assume I am, actually. But I was doing what I can do to tell about the people. And again, writing was a tool of survival for me. It's one of the tools that made me feel that I'm alive and I can make it. And now, I'm sorry, I'm going to give you the floor. But now if you read the book, which I didn't, I told you I never read it after I wrote it. It was very painful for me. Because I know everything, and I know every word, and it touches me in a certain way. But now, many of the people I'm talking about, they died later. They were killed, like my father, my mother-in-law. Of course, Bilal, he lives with me 40 days, then he's killed. And Ahmed, Muhammad, my friends, Abdul Jawad. Abdul Jawad died later in April, but he's mentioned in the book. So many, and if you read, just it's like, here, diaries become kind of fiction, because it's so far from reality. And you don't believe what happens, and I used to be asked by my friends when I was studying in Europe, how does it feel to live in Gaza? I used to say, it's like being in a piece of the news. And Gaza is a big jail. 85% of the Gazans, they've never been outside Gaza. I was teaching political science like you do in the university, and I had 150 students, girls and boys. They're third year in the university. And I made this, this was 2013 or something. How many of you ever left Gaza? It was like this, a hall, big hall. Just one girl raised her hand. And one of my students, I told you earlier, she was telling me, doctor, when I open my window, it opens inside Egypt, because she lives in the border with Rafah. Rafah, the border line. So she opens her window, it doesn't open in Palestine, it opens inside Egypt. But she said, and she's 21 years old, I never been outside Gaza. So this big prison, and it doesn't matter if the prison, I was in jail, in the Israeli jail in LA in my life. So it doesn't matter if the jail is, or the prison, 1 meter square or 300 meters square like Gaza. But now they're demolishing and destroying this prison on the heads of the prisoners. And they're moving everything. Instead of stopping this wall, it's enlarged now to Beirut. And they're saying, we're going to do with Beirut what we did in Gaza. And they're proud of this. And nobody could stop them, unfortunately. So what I'm saying to finish this is what remains of all of this? The images and the writings and the words, of course, and the insistence and persistence of the people to continue and to survive and to fight back for their life and survival.
Júlia, se pudesse comentar.
Could you comment on this, Julia, the unheard of, when my experience is drastically different from that of Atef, although it shares this feeling of disbelief. Is it possible that this is actually happening? To a major extent, that is why at the beginning, this we thought unheard of. It was almost comical. Oh, this is never going to happen. It's never happened before, so how can it be happening now? So this we prepared some barriers with sandbags and everything around the building, and all the time thinking one day we're going to laugh from our doing all that, putting up all the sandbags, and it was proved that all our effort was absolutely useless because the water flooded far over all our sandbags and our vain attempts that we thought we were overdoing it. So we watched the rain and the flood rising, and we realized little by little that this is actually happening. When I began to enter into WhatsApp group in my neighborhood and everything that was happening with the digital medias, and we learned that the street behind us was somewhat lower. The water was still rising, and every time we said, okay, if the water reached here, now it's going to begin to lower, because it's unthinkable for it to rise even more. It sounded all sounded impossible, and I think the time came when we actually learned it's impossible when the water actually began to flood out of our floor in our apartment building, not our sandbags, which were useful. It was not even the sandbags that failed at first. The water came from the soil, and no matter how the rain scared us at that time and frightened us, what was happening in Porto Alegre, it was not just rain. It's not only an extreme climate event. All of the defense system in the city failed miserably, and the city later did things that proved so ridiculous as the sandbags that we did. We saw the floodgates and the same sandbags that we had attempted to use at home, and it's a city attempting to deal with rising floodwaters, which shows us that nobody knew what to do at all. And at that time, when we said, okay, we're never going to be able to stop, that was when we left our apartment, and this feeling of unreality persisted even more. We spent 3 months away from our home, jumping and skipping from one place to another. And at that moment, it was very difficult for us to believe, is this actually happening in our own town? And it was their helicopters flying overhead trying to rescue people, and it was a lack of drinking water. And the rest of Brazil was sending drinking water to us, but it came in cans and donations, and a lot of neighborhoods went months without electricity and without running water, and all that seemed very difficult to believe that it was actually true. So I think that for me, there were two moments, turnaround moments for me, leaving home and to understand that's it, we're going to lose our home. And the other moment was after, when all this was happening and we began to follow the news and realized that we had gone for years witnessing the environmental collapse approaching us. And for a long time, I was in this very privileged, comfortable space of being able to look at the news and to feel and to ask, what can we do given the catastrophe, environmental catastrophe? And at that moment, I realized, no, we're already part of the environmental catastrophe. We're smack in the middle of it. So these two moments were the turning points for me.
It's like, in the war, you create your own devices of survival. It's just like, first, through writing, you detach yourself from what happens. The moment, be it the flood or the war, because the moment of writing itself is a moment of disattachment from reality. Because you assume that you're part of it, but you're watching it. And you pretend being this person who sees everything. So you stand up the hill and you look down at everything. And of course you see yourself either in your flat or in the street running from the rocket. And one of the things, like when you hear the voice of the rocket, this means you're not dead. It hits somebody else. Because if it hits you, you don't hear it. If you hear the explosion, this means you are not there. So this is how death tells about life. Somebody's death, his killing, tells you that you're alive. So the same thing when you write. The fact that you write is is a mere fact that you're not dead, you're not there. And when you run from death, you try to survive, of course, and you escape death. And so you develop your own strategies, how I'm going to survive. Like, but yeah, you think, what is the most fortified place in the house? Mm-hmm. Of course, assumingly it's near the staircase, because it's like lots of concrete, and so you put your mattress and you sleep there. But then, next in the morning, you go to rescue some of your neighbors, and you find that the whole house was demolished. Even the staircase was demolished, and people died there. So you start to develop, what if I slept near the beach in Rafah? Yeah, because it's the water, and, then of course people die near the water the next day. So it's just, so I think the whole process was a process of appreciating life. And here comes the why journeys. Because what is left of the war matters. And what can matters as well. The lives of the others who were killed, assassinated. And, until now, by the way, my family is until the rebel from 15th October, which means a year. My sister-in-law and her husband and her kids until the rebel. And I tried, and it's in the diary there, we tried to rescue part of them, but we didn't manage. We get some of them, 9 of them, and the rest remains until the rebel. And so the lives of those who were gone matters. And the life of those who managed to make it also matter. Mm-hmm. And this is why, what I would say as an author, not in general, writing is a celebration of life. Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah.
Quando a gente jantava ontem, vou esperar vocês aplaudirem. Quando nós jantávamos
when we were having
ontem,
dinner yesterday, last
eu falei
night,
que a ideia de não
I
existe mais
said
lá,
that the idea
dessa mesa, de juntar
there being no more
esses
there
dois relatos, esses dois testemunhos,
and bringing together
passava por
those
entender
two
como a própria
stories
cidade
and
tinha
writings
desaparecido.
had to do with
E o Atef,
understanding how the
falou
city
ontem
itself may
que
disappear.
você entendia que a
And
principal
Atef said
vítima
yesterday that you
é a
understood
própria
that the
cidade.
main
De
victim
alguma
was the
maneira,
city
a
itself,
cidade
that
ela passa
somehow
a ser o
the
testemunho da
city
violência de
becomes
Estado.
the
E aí eu lembro da
witness
Júlia
of
falando
state
que
violence.
hoje em Porto
And I
Alegre, quando
remember
ela anda
Julia
pela
saying
cidade, é
that
possível ver as
nowadays when she
marcas de
walks
onde
in
a
Porto
água
Alegre, you can
chegou.
still see the
Que elas
marks
são
of how high
inimagináveis,
the
né?
waters
Então, ainda que você
reached,
tenha
and they
vivido,
are
né, tem algo na
unimaginable.
água
So
que
even though
nivela,
you were
né,
there and you
a
experienced
altura das
it,
coisas num
there
lugar
is
inimaginável de que os
something
barcos puderam
that
passar por
makes
ali acima das
unbelievable
cabeças.
to see the markings
E
of
ontem também o
water
Atef falou
above your
nos
heads in
meus
the
livros
streets.
de romance,
And
se os personagens
also,
dos meus livros
someone said that in my
saíssem do livro e
novel,
chegassem em Gaza,
my novels,
eles não iam
Atef
reconhecer
said
o
that
lugar
if my
que eu
characters
montei
left
para
the
eles.
book and went to
Eu queria
Gaza,
que
they
vocês
would not
comentassem
recognize the place
pouco
that
sobre a
I
dimensão
created
não
for
só
them,
da
you were
casa,
saying. So I would
mas
like you to
dessa
comment not only
geografia
on the
muito
house
própria de
itself,
vocês.
but in this
E eu vou ler
very specific
trecho,
geography
Atef,
of
se você me
yours. And
permite, se
Atef,
não
if you
for muito
allow me, I'm
doloroso,
going to
do
read
seu livro,
an excerpt
em
from
português,
your
em que a
book
dimensão
in
do espaço
Portuguese, in
urbano
which
é
the
muito
dimension of the
evidente, né? Ela
urban
tá
space is
mais
very
explicitada.
evident. And we will
É no dia 26,
translate it freely.
1º de
It was
novembro. Eu
on
vou ler alguns trechos saltados que eu acho que eles dão a
the
dimensão
1st
disso
of
que a gente está
November.
falando. A cidade de Gaza
Gaza City is normally full of people. I had never seen Gaza like that, empty. The buildings had fallen one on top of another as if they had fallen asleep and toppled over, and in doing so they had knocked the neighboring buildings down. It was impossible to distinguish one building from another. Most of Sinada neighborhood was razed. I know the place like the palm of my hand. It's my neighborhood. I was born and grew up there. Many of the alleys disappeared, witnessed important moments in my childhood. I can tell dozens of stories that happen on these streets. In my mind, I am capable of redesigning them and sketching the buildings. Give me an architect and $1 billion, and I can rebuild everything from zero. A Jara, which is a neighborhood, is not made only of buildings and streets. Consists of all the memories of all the people who live there, the people and the relations that were established over time. It's not only the place where you were born, it's the place, the story of which merges with your own. So I would like to ask Julia if you could to think of this dimension of the urban space as memory and this testimony.
Eu acho que aconteceu algo muito.
I
Eu
think
sempre lembro
that
de momento chave.
I always remember a key moment, and those who are from Porto Alegre, the city, or those who were there, may remember close to the bus station there was a walkway that needed to be demolished to allow boats to reach some places of the city. And it was a horrible walkway. It was a dangerous place where people were robbed. It was ugly, but when they demolished it, which was something that you saw when you were arriving in the city by bus or by car, it was like the city welcoming you, and suddenly it was raised, and it was probably the day when the people in Porto Alegre felt more like they were from that place. But things would never be the same again, even if they replace the walkway. And at the same time, there is something that is still there in terms of memory, because the marks of the water are still there, and we walk in the neighborhoods that were flooded, and we all the time look at the level of the water marked on the walls. Oh, here, it's reaching my my shoulders. Oh, it's reaching my head here. Oh, the plants are coming back here. Okay. And this will probably be forgotten at some point. But then comes our work, the work of creating this memory, because the marks will disappear, and for many people it is very convenient that those memories disappear. And let's forget about this climatic event, let's leave it behind. And there is, it's hard, even for those who are there, to understand. We went back home, to our home, and when people go there to visit us and we tell them inside our house, we left a mark of the water level for people to believe what we tell them. And in the street, we tell them, oh, our neighbors from up the street, they left home on a boat, on a speedboat, and people tend not to believe. They say, oh no, you were dreaming, that's impossible. So the city still needs to build this memory up. It's not established yet. And Porto Alegre many years ago went through another flooding, but not as strong as this one. But now, I think that there were less recordings of the previous flood. But this memory runs the risk of disappearing, especially regarding the smaller cities around Porto Alegre that were totally flooded and disappeared. Many of them. In many places, we are discussing whether they should be rebuilt elsewhere, because it's not possible to rebuild them at the same place. And I cannot imagine what is it to tell someone, your city will disappear. Everything that you know and the places that you went to and the places about which people told you stories, all of this will disappear, because there's no more. There's no way to keep the city in the same place. And so, considering that we are speaking of the state of Rio Grande do Sul, and considering Porto Alegre as the city, and we live in a good neighborhood, and there are neighborhoods that are progressively being emptied because the city does not offer the conditions for people to go back home. So there are some commercial buildings that survived the pandemic, but now they were closed, and no one knows what's going to happen to them. And the guy that just left the room was shouting, "Oh, it happens every day in Cidade de Deus, a violent neighborhood in the city of Rio de Janeiro, and a privileged neighborhood." And so us from the middle class, only now we are seeing what can happen, and maybe we should do something to prevent those places from being emptied, because again, it is very convenient for many people to empty those places and then maybe gentrify it later. First, we remove those people from the place, and then we build new infrastructure, and then we will rebuild it in another way. And this is an urban project that will benefit from this disaster, which is a climatic, environmental, and political disaster.
I think from the side of the war, the conflict zone where I come from,
eu acho que de uma zona de conflito, de onde eu venho, o local é a principal vítima.
You know, the main target of all the conflict in the last 76 years is the place, the cities. You know, 485 Palestinian villages were demolished in 1948. They were made into zero. After deporting their original inhabitants, they were destroyed, and new houses and new towns were built on them. So now, if you look, there is no Gaza. You know, in the war, the city is demolished totally. And while you might understand in military war, you might destroy a military basement. You might. We can understand this is war sometimes. And you might attack, you know, certain building because they're militant. But why do you destroy 9 museums? 9 museums, of which some of the statues from the Canaanite time, 6,000 years old. And this is not our memory. And this is not our history. This is your history as a human being. Because these statues and these belongings or remains is common human history. And why do you destroy the main public library in Gaza, which is the largest public library in Palestine? Under which rebels we lost our cultural heritage of newspapers, which dates back 100 years ago, of books which were published in Jaffa and Haifa back then, 19th century. So I think what my people is targeted to is a demolition, you know. The place is assassinated, and the memory of the place is assassinated. The archival center of Gaza City is made into ruins. There, the whole documents of the municipality of Gaza in the last 150 years why? And I told you last night on the dinner, you know, when Napoleon conquered Gaza, we have this old palace, we call it Pasha Palace, which is a castle actually, it's not a palace. He used it as his office. Until now, the French is taking care sometimes of, you know, of the castle, because Napoleon was there. But most of conquerors, when they get in the place, they use these old places, but they destroyed it. And this is 800 years old castle. So the place is the victim. And unfortunately, you know, now the young generation will grow up not remembering these places, the place. And now you know what the Gazans do? They spend most of their time looking to videos and images of the Gaza before the war. And as if suddenly they found out that Gaza, wow, was very beautiful. It's their nostalgia which makes, and it's beautiful. It's not the most beautiful earth. It's not the most beautiful city on earth, but for me it is. And so just they look to the videos and how it looked like, and life in Gaza was very vivid. People, you know, in a cultural session in Gaza, poetry reading, you will find 500 listening to you. So it was a very vivid cultural city as well, because As I told you, in Gaza in 1985, in 1958, we had a union for cinema houses. A union for cinema houses. In many European capitals, you didn't have this union in the 50s. There was 16 cinema houses in Gaza in the 50s. And so all this place is assassinated. So you know, so sometimes, as I told you, I envy my characters that they cannot jump from the box. So they wouldn't feel lonely. They wouldn't miss their memory, but I do miss my memory. When I look to the videos of my neighborhood and the camp and the Rimali Quarter where I used to spend most of my day, and where I write, the cafe where I used to write my novels, actually, Karawan Cafe, and it no more exists. And it's a cafe from the 30s, this cafe, you know? It's like 100 years old. I say, yeah, wow, my characters are lucky. They don't jump and they don't feel lost. And so, you know, when you destroy a place of 6 or 9 years old, you know, 9,000 years old. It's an urban place. And what you got? It's, you know, this is unprecedented crime in history. It's just, you can destroy part of the city, military, but you don't destroy the whole city. And now they're destroying other parts, Jabalia and the others. So again, you know, what will be left for the future? What our colleagues as authors and journalists took images and photos and our writings, and because this will help them to remember, and accordingly we can reconstruct the place as it took place in our narrative. Yeah, so Gaza. I will finish this. I know. I love Gaza anyway, like many people they do, but it's a very big city, you know, which was subject to continuous war since, you know, in the First World War, the Allies, they destroyed half of Gaza city center from the sea, the French Navy and the British Navy. So it was always subject to destruction and demolishing, but it always, you know what is the sign of Gaza municipality? Anybody knows? The phoenix. This is a symbol of Gaza municipality since when? 1890, the 19th century. The municipality of Gaza used the phoenix, you know, this magic bird which comes from ashes. And the main square of Gaza, which is Palestine Square, you have the statue of this imaginary bird. Of course, the tanks went over it 10 times, you know, because it's very historic. And so even we're going to make it again, hopefully, inshallah.
Estão chegando perguntas de vocês aqui e elas de alguma maneira se encaixam.
I am receiving questions from you, and in some way they match some of the issues that I would like to ask to Julia and Atef. Today is October 11, which means that more than 1 year ago started the bombardments and attacks to Gaza. For those who read Atef's book, we can see that despair becomes more sharper around day 40, which is a very important day in his diary because of its symbolism. If we compare it to the attacks of the 14th, Atef speaks of 51 days, and we're speaking, the attacks in 2014 lasted for 14 days, 21 days, but now we're speaking of more than 1 year of bombardments and destruction. You started to mention that Gaza will be rebuilt one day, but I would like you to comment on how do you see this more immediate future in terms of escalation of the war and what it means in many senses. And also last week, we had the first round of municipal elections in Brazil, and the results was unbelievable. The mayor of Porto Alegre was almost re-elected in the first round of elections, even though Julia was telling us that the mayor specifically did not use the budgetary resources for the prevention of floodings, disinvested in many areas and removed investments that were already destined to be used to prevent the rise of water. And so this week, we realized that this is very urgent, and there were some questions that were related to the idea of what the future will bring to us and what can we do in the future. Julia? This is more difficult for me, first of all, because I don't know what to say about the elections. We are going to have a second round in Porto Alegre, and it is another moment of unbelievable and unimaginable, because we were expecting anything to happen but this. And it's very difficult to believe that there were more abstentions than votes for the mayor. So this also means that people are hopeless in the city, and people are not believing in the possibility of a political construction. And so I think that the solution would be voting through vote, so that we are able to rebuild the world or rebuild our city in a possible way, in an impactful way in the life of people, and also thinking of how to improve the city. And if we, I think that what I see now is that it doesn't matter for many people who will be the mayor, because at a given moment there was this floodings, and that made us feel very connected to the city. Usually we leave, we go about like feeling very disconnected from the city, from the territory itself. And in many cases, it's difficult because the city needed investment, and people are living in isolation in condominiums and not using public spaces, and public spaces are a little bit abandoned. And because of those gated communities in which people live, and so we have a municipal government that does not care about green areas, and those public free areas are being abandoned, and this makes in such a way that people are in a place which is not a city. They move from one gated place to another gated place, and the idea would be to recreate a community built around common goals, common values. But now we are unable to say what are the values that we want for our city, even though many times we travel to Europe and we think, oh, it's wonderful there. Everyone walks in the streets, everyone takes the buses and etc. But if we want to do something like this here, people think it's not good. It's not welcomed. And so the result is this kind of election result that we are unable to understand, because the only solution which is accessible for us who work with the words is try to rebuild the world, this world, somehow, and trying to define the territory in which we live. That's what defines us. That's where we wake up every day and we talk and we meet our neighbors. We talk to our neighbors and the shop owners, and maybe this is the only possible way to rethink cities as collective spaces.
Yeah, just the fact that we're talking about a year after the war, is reflective of the nature of this war. And my only hope is that next year and this time we don't talk about the second year of the war, because apparently all the international community couldn't stop this war from happening. And remember when the war broke out, we were just making guessing. I think in the book I mentioned it certain time. Oh, it will last for a week, 2 weeks. Then we say, yeah, you know, it's a month. Then we compare it to the previous war, 2014, 51 days. Then when 51 days pass, then we say, yeah, it's gonna, Europe and America will intervene to stop this before Christmas, as if they care about God or Christmas, you know. So we were hoping that, you know, they will force Netanyahu to stop it. Then the New Year, then Ramadan, the holy month of the Muslims, you know. Then the Eid. And now the American election. Don't laugh, you know. People, they were saying, yeah, Mr. Biden, before leaving, he will stop it. And he's not. And now they're waiting for the new American president. God knows who is he going to be, Trump or Harris, you know. But I don't believe that any of them will stop it. So I'm going to stop, you know. But this reflects of how international law and human rights are written for certain people, not for all the globe, believe me. It's for a few people in the world. It's not for all of us. And this is the truth. You know, it's the first time in history the head of the United Nations is considered persona non grata by a member state of the United Nations. Right? Israel considered the head of the persona non grata. Can you believe it? If any European country did it, they will kick it out of the United Nations. Nobody said a word. And when Netanyahu was put in the corner to stop the war, and everybody wanted him to stop, what he did? He went to Beirut. He said, let's have another fun. Let's destroy another city. And of course, if he's put in the corner, and now nearly 3,000 Lebanese are killed in this war. And the number is getting longer. And historical places are destroyed like Gaza. But nobody cares. So the fact that we're talking about this now is very telling about this human international society we're living in. It's where some privileged, some are not. Israel is the only country in the world that was made by a United Nations resolution. It's the only country. And it's the only country that never applied any of the United Nations resolution. 78 resolutions were taken by Security Council, and Israel didn't apply one of them. Of course, if any other country, ships will be moved and weapons and, you know. So what I'm saying is that the world is never just, and I know this. This is what my grandmother used to tell me. You know, this beautiful lady who was forced to leave Jaffa when she was 40-something, a very rich lady, and she has to walk barefooted on the sands of the beach until she arrived Jabalia, north of Gaza. She was always telling me, the word is not justice. Don't ask for justice. But we ask for the minimum of it. And this minimum even is not achieved. But if my grandmother didn't believe in the future, she wouldn't give birth to my father after 2 years of the Nakba. So we have to believe in the future, and the future is going to be better. And even this injustice and even this unfairness will not continue forever. Believe me. And someday we'll be put. Maybe I'm not going to be talking about this. I'm old enough maybe to live for this minute, but it will happen. And other generations will talk about how justice and fairness prevail. And let's hope so. Thank you very much.
Muitíssimo obrigada.
Thank you very much, Julia Dantas, Atef Abu Saif. It's a huge pleasure. I would like to remind everybody that Atef Abu Saif and Julia Dantas will be signing their books here outside. I want to thank you. That's all.